today I'm going to be reviewing EF Ultimate Break's Costa Rica adventure trip. This will actually be my 6th EF trip, and I have vlogged every single one before this, so those are back on my channel if you want to check them out. Just recently I have decided to start doing reviews of them as I get back, so this is the 2nd trip that I'm reviewing, and spoiler alert, it might be my favorite. So I actually went on this trip with 2 of my best friends as part of our annual Escape the Cold girls trip. This was both of their first ever EF Ultimate Break trip, so I was really excited to bring them along with me. And we went at the end of January into February, so it was the perfect winter escape. If you're looking for something like that, I highly recommend. I want to do a quick overview of the itinerary of what we did each day on my trip, and I'll also be reviewing the accommodations, the excursions, the transportation provided by EF, and of course I will be doing a full cost breakdown on this trip. I actually recorded everything I spent and also the cost of everything provided by EF had we not booked with them, so I'm really excited to share that with you guys. And then I am a good lover of a pros and cons list. In case you want to skip ahead to any of those, I'll have the timestamps below, but otherwise let's get into it. So day 1 is the day that you're going to fly from the United States to wherever you're visiting. On all my past EF trips so far, they are overnight flights, but on this trip we actually landed on the same day that we left, so it kind of felt like we had an extra day in the mix. So for this trip we flew from Piedmont Triad International Airport to Miami. We had about just a little less than a 2-hour layover, and then we flew direct to San Jose, Costa Rica. We had to go through customs and we had to go pick up my friend's bag. I traveled all carry-on, and I do have a video on packing if you'd like to see packing advice. After that, we just had to wait about 30 minutes for the other people in our transfer. It was kind of like right around rush hour at this point, so it took us about an hour to get from the airport to our hotel where we were staying for the night. We were also, I believe, the very first transfer to get to the hotel, so we got there around 5:30 p.m. and then we had a free evening. So the 3 of us actually decided just to order delivery and eat it in our room. After we ate, we just went to bed early so we could get our much needed sleep and be ready for our jam-packed day 2. This is the first day we're all officially meeting everybody, and we are traveling from San Jose to the Arenal region. I would highly recommend having snacks with you for this first day. We had a pretty early wake-up call. I think it was around like 7, and then we had about a 3 to 4 hour bus ride. I am someone who is prone to motion sickness, so I have to sit in the front of the bus, and I was fine without taking medicine, but I did have to look out. So also, if you're a motion sickness girly, I would maybe recommend taking medicine now that I know. Other than it being a travel day, the sort of main plan for day 2 is that you get to kayak in Lake Arenal. So I did choose to wear my swimsuit on the bus all day because I wasn't sure what the changing situation was going to be like. But before that, we did have a surprise stop, which our tour director told us he could tell us, or it could be a surprise, and we all wanted it to be a surprise. So we had no idea what we were getting into on the way there, but I do think this is something they do with most trips. He actually took us to a dance class. I do kind of wish I had known that, only so I could have worn different shoes. After that, we had lunchtime at a restaurant in La Fortuna, and then we had about 30 minutes free time where we got to walk around the little town of La Fortuna itself, and then it was finally time to kayak. Unfortunately for us, it had started raining pretty badly at this point, and it was also pretty cold, so we were kind of battling through it. You are apparently right below the Arenal volcano and you get really cool views of it, but I can't tell you that because this was our view. We still made the most of it. We had a lot of fun. We got to get out and swim. We were on tandem kayaks, so it doesn't matter what kind of shoes you wear for this. And then from the time we got there to the time we were walking back to the bus was just about an hour and a half, and not all of that time was spent paddling. Like I said, we had a swim break. So after we got back on the bus, we were all sitting soaking wet and cold on our towels for about 15 minutes until we got back to our hotel. We had just enough time for everybody to get showered and changed, and then we had our EF included welcome dinner, which for us was at El Jardín de Frida, and that was our full day 2. So day 3 is your first free day or optional EF excursion. My friends that I was traveling with and I decided not to do this because I had found this resort called The Springs that I really wanted to go to. They filmed The Bachelor Peter's season. They went here and it's full of hot springs. We just wanted a relaxing day to spend our time here, and so I found us a day pass, which also included horseback riding, river tubing, and lunch. And then it actually gave you 2-day access to the hot springs. So unfortunately, we didn't have enough time on our EF trip to use that, but highly recommend looking into it. We literally spent our entire day at the springs. We got there at like 7:30 in the morning and we didn't leave till like 10 o'clock at night. But if you do want to have EF plan your activities for the entire day, you can absolutely do so. You can pre-book the whitewater rafting excursion on their website. And then additionally, that afternoon, once we got on our trip, our tour director set up an optional chocolate making and tasting tour thing. Finally, that evening, there is an included visit to a hot springs, which in our case, the group went to Baldy Hot Springs. And that's something that is actually not an additional excursion. It's already included in the price of the trip. So day 4 is actually going to be another majority travel day. I would actually say for me, this felt like the longest, hardest bus day. First thing this morning, we were finally lucky enough to see the Arenal volcano for the first time our whole trip. And then we rode about 30 minutes from our hotel to La Fortuna waterfall. Once we got there, our guide got off the bus and got everybody's entrance wristbands. We took a couple group pictures and then we started our hike down. There are 530 steps from the top to the bottom. And obviously what goes down must come up. We were given a time allotment that we had to just explore as much as we wanted and then be back on the bus at a certain time. So in case you're curious about timestamps, we stepped into the park at about 8:30 in the morning, just a little bit before. And then we all kind of walked down as a group. We made it to the waterfall just a little bit after 8:45, and then we had to be back on the bus at 10:15. There were also bathrooms at the top, so you could change out of your swimsuit if you had worn it. And there was also a little restaurant and coffee shop if people wanted to get snacks for the drive. When we got back on the bus, our guide actually surprised us with pineapples. He showed us how to cut them and we all got literally a quarter of a pineapple to ourselves. So that was an amazing treat. And then we had about a 2-hour ride around Lake Arenal to the other side where we had a lunch stop at sort of a like cafe with sandwiches and stuff. Also, there were cows, so that was fun. There was a little gift shop and of course bathrooms. This was our only stop for the entire day, so keep that in mind if you need to use the bathroom a lot. After lunch, we had about a 3-hour drive to our hotel in Monteverde, and it was really rainy the whole time. Just got to give a shout out to our bus driver because those roads and the weather were insane. Finally stopped raining once we were about 30 minutes away from our hotel, and we got to see a rainbow, so that was fun. And then we got to check in. We did have a little bit of free time for dinner, and then there was an optional night hike. I did none of this. I was so tired that I just crashed at like 6:30 and I stayed asleep until the next day. Day 5 was another really fun high activity day. We started out early in the morning and drove about 30 minutes from our hotel to the Salvatierra Adventure Park and the Monteverde Cloud Forest, where we're going ziplining. We got there at about 8:30 in the morning and there were already a ton of groups there, so we all got checked in and got our gear, and then they took us by little vans up to the starting point. We had a short hike, like 5 minutes to get to the first line, and then about halfway through there was a like 10-15 minute hike between the two, and it was kind of hard. Just the fact that we couldn't carry any water with us and we were lugging around our harnesses. As someone who has been ziplining a lot, these were like the coolest zip lines I've ever been on. They were so long that we had to ride some of them tandem because they were like, we wouldn't weigh enough to make it across on our own. After we finished our final zip line, we drove about 15 minutes over to the official entrance of the Monteverde Cloud Forest, and we did a little nature walk there where our guide was telling us a little bit about the area and we were looking for animals. After that, it was pretty much free time. We had 2 options for the rest of our day. We decided to go back to the Salvatierra Adventure Park because we wanted to do the hanging bridges that the area is very famously known for. They also had one restaurant where we could get lunch, and it was a small menu, but it was very good. As for the activities, there were a few packages we could choose from. Here are the options that we had. They had a lot more packages that also included some variation of the ziplining canopy tour, but obviously since we had just done that, these were the ones we could choose from that did not include that. We ended up spending just about 4 more more hours here by the time we did the butterfly garden and walked all the hanging bridges. And then the park itself actually provided transportation like every 30 minutes, I think, that you could catch back to town. So we made sure to get on the last one of those at 4 p.m. But if we hadn't, our guide said we could just Uber and it would be fine. We had just a little bit of downtime at the hotel where we got showered and changed. And then our tour director actually organized a group dinner for us that evening and everything was included. And now we're finally to day 6 where we will be leaving the mountains and we're headed down to the west coast for some much needed beach time. We left our hotel in Monteverde fairly early in the morning and then we had another 2 to 3 hour bus ride. And then we had a stop at a sort of restaurant slash gift shop, which was also our allotted lunchtime. And for some reason, we stopped here for like 2 hours. Everybody was definitely eating weird lunch combos. I had 2 cold empanadas and some mashed potatoes and it held me over, but it was definitely not my favorite lunch. Everyone was done eating and even shopping in like 30 minutes. So majority of us actually ended up just sitting in the literal parking lot on the asphalt for an hour. We were definitely not a huge fan of that because we were ready to be on the beach. And once we finally left the rest stop, we had another stop not at a beach. It was a sort of outdoor gift shop that also did alligator tours, and this was something that was optional. However, if you chose not to pay the $20 cash to go on this alligator tour, you just had to sit in that really hot outdoor gift shop for an hour and a half. So our entire group, except for I think one person, did the alligator tour because, you know, that's a lot better than sitting around. And the alligator tour was neat. We got to see one get super close to our boat and there were a ton of birds, but I personally just don't know if that was the best use of our limited time. Finally, after all of that, they got us to a beach around 3 p.m. where we had the option to do stand-up paddleboarding that was included. Unfortunately, the water was really choppy and we were out and back in less than 40 minutes. I'm not entirely sure if that was due to the water or how much time we normally spend there, but it did not feel like enough time at all. But luckily after that we did have about 30 more minutes to just run around on the beach as we pleased, and then we were back on the bus and to our last hotel. We got our rooms, dropped our bags, and then went straight to the pool. We were able to watch the sunset from the hotel and then go get changed for dinner. We decided to eat again with the group at a restaurant our tour director picked out and took us to, and it did not disappoint. So day 7 was entirely dedicated to the beach. Finally. And for a majority of EF trips, you're going to be going to Manuel Antonio National Park, which is about 45 minutes away in Quepos. The entire park is located in the Central Pacific Conservation Area. It's also a super huge draw to tourists because there is no shortage of wild monkeys. However, for unknown reasons on our trip, they were unable to secure tickets for us. But I personally think EF handled it really well and was kind of more pleased with the outcome because they ended up getting us tickets to a beach club that was only like 20 minutes from our hotel. Luckily for us, we actually ended up seeing a ton of them on the beach that we were at as well, including a mom and a baby on its back. I swear, one of the cutest things I have ever seen in my life. We got to read, we got an included lunch, and then we finished the night at Pop's Ice Cream. So day 8 was another full free day that you could choose to spend at the beach, or there was an optional catamaran cruise excursion, which we did, and I have to say, I actually genuinely think this was my favorite day of the entire trip. It was so warm and perfect and fun, and we each got 4 included drinks and an included lunch. The boat was huge. There were like 3 groups on it, including our EF group. I personally thought it was kind of fun to have other groups on it because we got to talk to other travelers and it was neat to hear their thoughts on Costa Rica, and it was overall just a great time. So I'm really glad that that's how we chose to spend our free day. We ended the night at another famous restaurant that our tour director knew about. It's called El Avion, and the entire restaurant is literally built around an old decommissioned plane that they've converted into a bar. So also highly recommend this restaurant if you can squeeze it in, but it is like an hour and a half away from where our hotel was. So for the very last day of our trip, we headed back to San Jose from Jaco, and this was definitely my favorite travel day. Although it was long, I think it had the best stops. We stopped in Sarchi, which is the artisan town, and we got to see how they do some of the crafts that Costa Rica is famously known for. And then we had a second stop at the Doca coffee plantation, which even as someone who does not like coffee, was very fun. We made it back to San Jose at the same hotel we stayed at the first night. We had like 15 to 30 minutes to get changed and ready for our farewell dinner, which was at this beautiful restaurant about 30 minutes away up on a hill overlooking all of San Jose. Not only was it a fabulous all-you-could-eat buffet, but there was also like a full show at the end of it, and they ended up pulling us all in to participate. And then we just headed back to the hotel. We got back at about 10 p.m. and then the next morning we had varying transfers to the airport. We were lucky enough to get to sleep in a little bit because we were the last departure, but most everyone else did leave before the sun came out. So that was a quick-ish overview of the itinerary, just to give you a more detailed run through of what this trip can look like. With that considered, I'd like to kind of review what I thought of the pacing of this trip. And for me, I think out of 5 stars, I'm gonna give it a 3.5. If I wasn't considering all the weird breaks on travel days and the optional, not really optional activities, I would have given this a 5, because I think everything included in the way we go from the Arenal region to the mountainous region to the beach region was perfectly planned. I do wish a little bit more thought had been put into those first 2 major travel days. Like I said, I think the way that the last travel day was laid out was actually perfect, because it didn't feel like too much bus time, but also the stops didn't feel like they were a waste of time, for lack of better words. Most specifically on day 6, that is listed as a beach day on EF's website, but I really would not consider it a beach day since we got maybe an hour of beach time total. But overall, I do think EF does a really good job with this trip at giving you a lot for your money. Of all the trips that I've been on, this is probably the one that does that the best, but I do just think there were a couple misses pacing wise that could be improved to make this the best trip ever. Next, I want to do a quick review of the accommodations where we stayed. This was the essential trip, which typically you would have more than 4 roommates. However, we just happened to really luck out because myself, my 2 friends, Caroline and Kaylee, went together and requested to be roomed together. At literally every hotel, we ended up having a private room for just the 3 of us. So the first and last hotel that we stayed at in San Jose was called Costa. This one was really nice for what it was. We had way more room than we needed. The room that we had the first night was definitely better and felt cleaner than the room that we had the second time around. The breakfast at this hotel sucked though. It was actually pretty much non-existent. I don't even know why I'm calling it breakfast, especially because I feel like the first day that we slept here was one of the days we needed breakfast more than anything. It definitely loses some points. Our second accommodation was Selena La Fortuna. There were 3 rooms for girls. The 3 of us were put by ourselves in a 4-person bunk, but all the other girls had to split between 2 10-person bunks and had to use a shared bathroom. Unfortunately, there were still kind of a lot of issues with this hotel that Caroline would be mad at me if I did not address. I definitely did not think it was the best. It was probably the least nice hotel that we stayed at on this trip. However, I thought it was fine considering we were like kind of in the middle of a jungle. We were each only given a single sheet to sleep with that was like paper thin. We were also right on a very busy street, and so there was a lot of street noise outside. I'm a heavy sleeper, so I was fine, but Caroline and Kaylee said that it was rough in the middle of the night. So if you're a light sleeper, maybe bring earplugs. And then the bathroom was also not that great. I think the shower was broken because it was spraying water everywhere. And then also when we were given our room key for the first time, the doorknob fell off. So that really was not ideal, but I do feel like that was a one-of-one sort of situation. I think it's kind of funny now. Like, it's not a warning that I think this will happen to you, but it did happen to us, so. All that being said though, this one had my favorite breakfast. The way they did it was actually like a sit down and serve sort of breakfast. Like we would order off a menu each day and just give them our breakfast coupons, and I had some really good pancakes, and there was a dog just roaming around, so I can't be mad. Our third hotel in Monteverde was Altar de Ser Santa Elena, and this was actually like fully family owned. They literally got up and made us breakfast each morning. They were so sweet, and one of the women handmade bags and was selling them also right there in the kitchen slash dining room area. The rooms themselves were very nice. The beds were large and comfortable. The only thing was also because we were like in the mountains, everything was kind of a little bit open to the outside. Our third hotel that we stayed at in Jaco, we were at for 3 nights, and it was called the Mar de Luz. And despite being an essential trip, these rooms were actually divided up by 2s. Except for our group of 3 where there was a full bed and a king bed, so Kaylee and I just shared that one and Caroline took the full. So overall, I thought the accommodations were fine. They definitely aren't the best ones that I've ever stayed at, but I also kind of expected them to maybe not be as nice as we're used to. But like I said too, other than Costa Conde, I was super pleased with the breakfast at every single one of these places, and honestly, I would rather have that when it's a super action-packed trip like this. I just want them to give me sustenance and a comfortable place to sleep. So overall, I would rank the accommodations at a 3 out of 5. So now on to excursions. This trip had 3 EF pre-bookable excursions. They were whitewater rafting, a night hike, and the catamaran cruise. As I sort of mentioned in the itinerary breakdown, I only booked one of these, but I absolutely loved it, and if I was just rating that, I would give it a 5 out of 5. Highly recommend that if you're booking this trip, this is the one excursion that you do. As for the other 2, I'm sure the whitewater rafting would be fun. I've just done it a lot, and I wanted to have that full free day uninterrupted so we could go to a resort. A lot of the group that did do it said that it was fun. It was just really cold because they got rained on. And as for the night hike in Monteverde, I probably wouldn't recommend it just based on my friend's review. I honestly don't really like hiking as it is, so I don't want to pay money to do something that I already know I don't like. My friend Caroline, who did do it and is an avid hiker, said it really was more just like a guided nature walk. So if you're concerned about the hike part being in the title, you should be fine. She said more than anything, they were just kind of spotting animals, and it was only like an hour and a half. So unless you're interested in this trip specifically for the wildlife, I feel like you could probably skip this one and just have a peaceful evening instead. The other excursion that I want to talk about is the alligator boat excursion that we did. Just like every EF trip that I've been on before this, this was one of our optional excursions that our tour director told us about once we got on the trip. However, we drove out of the way to stop at this place, and although it was optional, if you didn't want to pay the $20 to go on the alligator boat, you just had to sit at this like outdoor gift shop thing and wait for everyone to be done. Like there was no alternate options that you could do. At that point, I feel like they should have just tacked $20 onto the price of the trip and have it be included if it's not really going to be optional. It was a pretty cool excursion, honestly, but it kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth because of that situation, and if I'm being honest, I would have rather just been at the beach anyway. So as a whole, with all things considered, I'm going to give the excursions category 4 out of 5 stars. Now onto the EF provided transportation. I thought it was great. Everything went super smoothly, and I gotta say, our bus driver was a talented man, because some of these roads we were on in Costa Rica definitely had us all on the edge of our seats a little bit. I do love on this trip the fact that there's only one bus and there are no internal flights or anything. I just think that's really nice and stress-free for a vacation. So for me, transportation's getting an easy 5 out of 5. Onto the food that we had on this trip. I thoroughly enjoyed everything that we ate. Like I said, I really enjoyed the breakfast at the hotels, and I'm not even really a breakfast person, but also everywhere else that we ate I really enjoyed. And I'd say our tour director picked 90% of the meals that we ate. This is also abnormal for an essential trip, but I ended up with a lot of included meals. Not only did we have our welcome and farewell dinners like every other EF trip, the farewell was definitely the best one that I've had, and the welcome was up there. It was really good. But we also had a provided dinner one night in Monteverde, and we had 2 included lunches, one on the day that we were supposed to go to Manuel Antonio National Park, which again is sort of a one-off situation, but I'm not complaining. And secondly, on the following day, if you do book the catamaran cruise excursion, it has included lunch as well, which I thought was really good for the fact that they just made it all right there on the boat. So food for this trip, I'm giving another 5 out of 5. As for the weather, this is of course something that EF EF can't control and doesn't affect my opinion of the way that they run the trip. However, I do like to include it in my reviews just in case anyone is curious about booking this trip at the same time of year. And unfortunately, despite visiting outside of their raining season, we still got a ton of rain, especially in the Arenal region, which was honestly pretty disappointing since that did affect our view of the Arenal volcano for basically the entire time we were there, which is the big major attraction of this area. But it was okay because honestly that means I'll just have to go back and visit another time, which I'm definitely not complaining about. This is one of the smaller number of trips that EF runs pretty much year round if you're looking for a not freezing cold trip to take from like November to February, but I'm certain that it would also be absolutely wonderful any other month of the year. So as for our trip specifically, I'm going to rate the weather at a 3.5. Really quickly, I also like to mention safety in my reviews. I don't think this is somewhere that many people are like wildly concerned about it being unsafe. We were always in some sort of group on this trip, and I actually think it's the first trip ever where I didn't spend like a single lick of time alone, but I don't think I would have felt uncomfortable in any way had I wanted to. Our tour director was also very transparent with us, like giving us some warnings around the San Jose and Jaco areas where he said maybe don't go out at night by yourselves. So I do really appreciate that he would give us those tips and clearly took our safety very seriously. That is just another reason why I love to travel with EF Ultimate Break. So I'd also give safety a 5 out of 5. So now on to the nitty gritty. This is going to be the longest that I talk about one thing since the itinerary, so buckle up. I have made a complete cost breakdown for you. I tracked down every single thing that was included in our EF Ultimate Break trip and how much it would have cost had we booked the exact same thing ourselves. Starting off, the exact flight that I took from Greensboro to San Jose would have cost $450 had I booked it myself. This is definitely the one place where I overpaid because I know EF charged me more than that, but just for the convenience and the fact that it was all part of the payment plan, it's fine. One night at Costa would be approximately $92. 2 nights at Selena, approximately $120. 2 nights at Attar de Serre would be also approximately $120. 3 nights at Mar de Luz would be $225, and one final night at Costa Conde was another $92. To rent a car from the San Jose airport for 10 days would have cost approximately $1,000. And I have no way of knowing how much we spent on gas or would have spent. So just keep in mind also that that is not accounted for in this list, but is a major headache that I was happy to pay EF to not have to have. Now on to activities. Kayaking Lake Arenal would have cost approximately $75. The Baldy Hot Springs would have cost $47. Access to La Fortuna Waterfall was $20. The ziplining canopy package at Salvatierra was $78. Entrance to the Cloud Forest Reserve was $26. And then the day that we went paddleboarding, the only thing I could find was $85 for 3 hours. But since we were only there for maybe an hour, I put it down as approximately $28.33. Tickets to Manuel Antonio National Park would be $55. The Ocean King catamaran that we booked was $89. The Doka coffee plantation tour was $28. And the total for the welcome and farewell dinners would have cost somewhere around $65 a person. So the total of everything that you would get provided by EF comes out to be approximately $2,610. As for what I then spent once on the trip, I spent a total of $231.19 on food, which is approximately $23 a day for everything I ate, which includes 3 meals that I had at airports on our travel days. I spent approximately $70 on tips to our EF tour guide as per this message. I spent $19.11 on taxis, which was split 3 ways between myself and my 2 friends. And this was just our transportation to and from the Springs Resort, which we did on our own outside of EF. I spent $17.22 on the 1 drink that I got at the Springs Resort. And I spent $84.72 on souvenirs. For additional activities, I spent $69.15 at Salvatierra Adventure Park and $20 cash for the optional, non-optional crocodile boat tour. So based on all that, I personally think this trip was very worth the money. Of all the EF trips that I have ever taken so far, I actually feel like this was the one with the most things included. Had I started doing these cost breakdowns prior to this trip, I honestly don't think the total value would add up to be quite as much as this one did. And when I think about the fact that I got all that and only had to pay a bi-weekly payment for a few months and then got there and didn't have an ounce of stress, I'm honestly so thankful that I booked this trip with EF. So I honestly think that the value for your money on this trip is a 5 out of 5 stars. As I've said before, there are a couple pros that are always going to make this list just for being an EF Ultimate Break trip. But as we get into this trip specifically, I really enjoyed that it was an easy flight from the US. Plus, it didn't feel like we lost any time because of jet lag due to a major time change. Secondly, I like how simple the transportation is on this trip. The fact that you have one bus the whole time and no internal flights or transfers. You get a little bit of everything on this trip. I think I said that for my Germany, Italy, Switzerland review, but this time I really mean it even more so, because you get a little bit of history, you get nature, you get adventure, you get relaxation. So I didn't realize how much I was forgetting when I said it last time, but this one really has a little bit of everything. I also really appreciated how many things on this trip were included, not just because of the price breakdown that I mentioned, but also I like that since we're paying this company to plan everything for us, that they actually filled the time instead of giving us a bunch of free time like most of their Europe trips, which for the Europe trips I always thought I enjoyed that because there were so many things that I would want to do. But the appeal of this Costa Rica trip is that everything that I would have wanted to do or like saw as recommendations online, EF already had it planned, so I didn't need to do any of that on my own. And the final pro for this trip is that it's warm. Wherever my other cold hating girlies are, this is a trip for you. No matter what time of year that you take this trip, I can pretty much guarantee that it's gonna be warm. On to the cons. I'm a girl who's pretty easy to please, but because I'm doing these videos to try to help people make an informed decision, I really try to think up some cons, but I'm gonna be honest, it was really hard for this trip and I only have 3. The only major con was the fact that there were these non-optional optionals that I already talked about. Secondly, I would say the hotel culture in general was just maybe not the same as most people are used to, and you could honestly solve that by just booking a plush trip, I don't know. And then finally, the unpredictable weather, which of course can happen anywhere you go. This is unfortunately just kind of the first time that I've gotten unlucky with it, but it's obviously also not EF's fault. It's just something I want to mention about traveling to this area of the world in general. And that was truly all the cons I could think of. So that is the end of my spiel on the EF Ultimate Break Costa Rica adventure trip. I have been talking for hours at this point, so I really hope that by the time I edit everything down, it's not that long. Just as a fun game to play with my future self, I'm gonna guess that at this point in the editing process, I'm somewhere between like 39 to 42 minutes. So if I was close, give me a like on this video, or if I wasn't close, you should also still like it. But my overall thoughts of this tour are that I absolutely love it. It honestly tops my list of the 6 EF Ultimate Break tours that I have taken at this point. I want to point out that I think it just speaks volumes as to how good this trip is, because even despite having kind of a lot of not good things happen on this trip, I still have such fond memories of this trip as a whole. Of course, this one was a little extra special because I went with my 2 best friends, but we were even talking about it the other day and I mentioned how it had been so rainy at the beginning and they were both like, I don't remember it being that bad, which is really funny because I myself had even forgot, but the only reason I knew about it is because I was vlogging. So if you are interested in taking this trip for yourself or exploring any other EF Ultimate Break trips and you've never traveled with them before, you can actually save $100 if you book through my link that's in the description, and this is applicable to any trip and stackable with any sales. So no matter when you're watching this, you can save $100. I hope this video was helpful and I love answering people's questions. So if you have any more, please leave them in the comments. And with that, I release you. That is the end of this video, unless you want to stay to see what $84 worth of souvenirs from Costa Rica looks like. I'm gonna be honest, looking at it all now, I'm not sure if it was worth that much, but I'm happy with everything that I got and it reminds me of memories of my trip, so I wanted to show you all anyway. Item number 1 is this shirt that I'm wearing. This is what it actually looks like without me having to stand up to show you. And I bought this as well as this little hand-painted magnet and this little sloth guy, all from the artisan shop that we visited at Sarchi. Then actually the first souvenir that I bought on the trip was this Costa Rica baseball hat from the La Fortuna waterfall gift shop. And that was actually all that I personally bought on the trip, but there was one item that everyone else bought that I had a lot of regret for not getting, so I ended up buying it at the airport. And that is this giant bottle of Luzano salsa. Most definitely not anything like salsa, but if you're going to Costa Rica, please try this. We were all obsessed with it, and I actually got this giant bottle for $14 because they weren't selling any that were actually carry-on liquid size. So I was like, you know, if I'm gonna risk it at all, I may as well get the giant one, and it did clearly make it safely home with me. And then also at the airport, I just got this cutie little monkey crossing patch. I just thought it was adorable and the perfect reminder of all those monkeys that we saw on the beach. I also didn't see this anywhere else before the airport, so I just felt like it was a sign. If you made it this far to the real actual end of the video, thank you so much for watching, and comment below what you think my next EF Ultimate break trip is going to be. It is already booked, it's actually already paid off, and I leave very soon, and I cannot wait for this one. It's somewhere I have never been before, so I can't wait to see what it's like and bring you guys along. So if you do want to see more, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you on my next trip.